The night was heavy with silence, broken only by the sound of shattering glass. Emma's hands trembled as she stared at the letter on the table, the ink smudged by her tears. She whispered, "Why would you leave without a word?" Her voice cracked under the weight of grief. The dim light of the single lamp flickered, casting shadows across the walls, each one clawing at her soul like memories she wished to erase. Her chest tightened as if her lungs refused to carry her forward. She felt the world collapsing around her, every breath becoming a fight against the weight of despair. The echoes of laughter that once filled the room now seemed like cruel ghosts. She pressed her palm against her heart, aching to silence its violent rhythm. The room spun with suffocating emptiness, and yet her pain was loud, deafening, a storm within her. Emma said, "You promised me forever, and now I'm left holding pieces of a life I can't rebuild." The storm outside wailed like a reflection of her heart, yet inside the silence was heavier than thunder. Emma sat motionless on the cold floor, clutching her knees, her body small against the weight of emptiness. The room that once felt safe now mocked her with shadows, every corner whispering of promises broken. She thought of the laughter that once danced here, the moments stolen by betrayal. How could love vanish so easily? Emma whispered, her words lost in the stillness. The storm pounded against the glass, reminding her of a truth she could not run from. Grief carved itself into her bones, and she felt as if she were breaking apart. Emma closed her eyes, but memories refused to fade. The sound of his voice lingered, echoing through her mind like a cruel melody she could not silence. Each word he once spoke of love now cut her deeper than any blade. Her body shook with the weight of remembering, her chest heaving as if her lungs rejected the air. She whispered, "You swore we were unbreakable." The walls seemed to lean in closer, suffocating her with their silence. Every creak of the floor felt like footsteps that would never return. A scream rose in her throat, but withered into sobs she could not contain. She dragged herself upward, gripping the edge of the table for support, her body weak, as though every muscle resisted movement. Her legs trembled beneath her as the letter stared back at her from the wood. Emma said, "If love was real, why did it end in silence?" The words cracked in her throat, sharp as broken glass. She wanted to tear the paper apart, but her fingers refused, as though holding it was all she had left. The room's flickering light painted her face in fractured emotion. Anger, sorrow, disbelief. She felt like a ghost in her own life, chained to words inked by betrayal. Emma collapsed back into the chair, exhaustion carving lines into her face. She buried her head in her hands, the sobs spilling free at last. The sound filled the silence, raw and jagged, like a wound torn open. "I can't carry this anymore," she whispered between gasps, her words cracked with despair. The storm outside raged louder, lightning flashing through the window, a cruel reflection of her inner chaos. For a moment, she wished it would all end. The storm, the pain, even herself. But then her sobs softened into silence, her body trembling as though searching for the strength to survive. Morning broke through the storm with pale light, yet Emma felt no warmth. She sat by the window, eyes swollen from the night's grief, staring at the world as though it moved without her. A bird landed on the sill, shaking water from its feathers, alive despite the storm's cruelty. Emma whispered, "How can such fragile things survive what I cannot?" Her reflection in the glass startled her, a face she no longer recognized, hollowed by sorrow. The silence pressed against her chest, daring her to break. She reached out, fingers brushing the cold pain, searching for a connection to something real. The door creaked, and a familiar voice called gently, "Emma, are you awake?" Her closest friend, Daniel, entered with quiet steps, carrying the warmth of presence she had long forgotten. Emma turned, her lips parting but no words forming, her throat aching. Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder, steady and unyielding. His eyes met hers with compassion deeper than words. "You don't have to face this alone," he said softly. Emma's heart trembled, the walls she built beginning to fracture. She longed for the comfort his voice offered, a reminder that her pain, though hers, was not hers to carry alone. Emma's voice cracked, fragile as a broken string. "I can't feel whole anymore, Daniel," she whispered, her gaze dropping to her trembling hands. Daniel leaned closer, his presence grounding her storm. "You are not broken beyond repair," he said firmly, though his tone carried a gentleness that made her eyes sting with tears. The air grew heavy with emotion, every word weaving a fragile bridge between despair and hope. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe she wasn't as alone as she thought. Her chest tightened, but this time with something unfamiliar, the weight of possibility. Daniel's hand lingered in hers, steady, unshaken by her trembling. "Grief doesn't define who you are," he said, his eyes unwavering. Emma shook her head, tears spilling freely. "But it's all I feel," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Daniel squeezed her hand gently. "Then, let me feel it with you." Her breath caught, startled by his unrelenting loyalty. A fragile warmth flickered inside her, the faintest spark against endless night. For the first time since the letter, the silence in her heart was shared, no longer echoing, only her voice. She whispered, "Thank you," her words trembling but real. Later, Emma sat on the porch with Daniel beside her, the storm finally broken, the world washed in clarity. The wet earth smelled of renewal, though her heart still carried ache. She whispered, "Do you think healing is even possible for me?" Daniel looked at her, his gaze firm yet kind. "Healing doesn't erase the scars, Emma. It teaches you how to live with them." His words lingered like truth carved into stone. She inhaled deeply, her lungs filling with air she hadn't realized she had been denying herself. For the first time, hope dared to brush against her pain. The days grew heavier, and Emma felt the ground beneath her feet becoming unstable again. She walked through the old park where she once laughed freely, but now every bench carried a memory. Every path echoed with betrayal. Her chest tightened as she replayed the last words she had heard from him, words that cut deeper now than ever before. Daniel walked beside her, silent, sensing her unrest. "I thought love was supposed to be a refuge," she murmured, her voice trembling. Daniel said softly, "Sometimes it breaks us before it saves us." The words pierced her, stirring a storm she tried to silence. That evening, Emma returned home, only to find a letter pushed beneath her door. The handwriting was unmistakable. Her breath caught, the paper shaking in her hands. She hesitated, terrified of what the words might say. When she finally opened it, her body stiffened. The message was short but cruel, written with a coldness that stripped away what little healing she had found. "You were never enough," it read, the ink pressed deeply into the page. Emma collapsed into a chair, the weight of rejection pulling her downward. Every scar inside her felt torn open again, raw and unhealed. Daniel arrived quickly after her call, finding Emma with the letter crumpled at her feet. Her eyes were swollen, her voice cracked. "He still owns my pain," she admitted, shame weighing on every word. Daniel crouched before her, lifting her chin so their eyes met. "He only owns it if you give it to him," he said, firm yet kind. Emma shook her head violently. "How do I stop when it feels like my heart is bound to him?" Daniel's gaze softened. "You fight, Emma. You choose yourself even when it feels impossible." The silence between them screamed with unspoken truth. Emma wandered through the old streets the next day, searching for pieces of herself. Each familiar corner whispered of promises broken. She paused outside a cafe they once shared, her reflection staring back from the windowpane. Inside, laughter and warmth danced among strangers, mocking her solitude. She whispered, "He built memories in me that I can't escape." Her hand pressed against the glass, trembling. Passers-by moved around her, their lives untouched by her chaos. The world kept spinning, indifferent to her wounds. She turned away, the ache heavier, yet a strange determination flickered beneath her sorrow. That night, Emma sat across from Daniel at the porch, the air heavy with her silence. Finally, she spoke. "He wants me to believe I am nothing." Her words carried fire and fragility. Daniel leaned forward, his voice steady. Then prove him wrong, Emma. Prove to yourself that you are more than what he broke. Tears welled in her eyes, but this time they carried not only sorrow, but anger. For the first time, she felt the stir of defiance, a flame ignited beneath the ashes of despair. She whispered, "I don't know how yet, but I will fight." Emma sat in her room, staring at the crumpled letters on the floor, when her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Her pulse quickened, dread seizing her chest. The text read, "There are truths he never told you." Her hands shook violently, fear clashing with curiosity. She whispered, what truths could still matter? Minutes later, another text arrived with an address and nothing else. The silence in the room felt suffocating, the shadows pressing closer. For a long moment, Emma thought about ignoring it, burying herself in pain. But something in her heart, a faint but persistent flame, told her this was the thread she had been waiting for. She muttered, "I can't turn away now." Daniel insisted on going with her. The night air was sharp, the streets quiet, except for the distant hum of passing cars. Emma clutched the slip of paper with the address, her fingers cold despite the warmth of Daniel's presence beside her. She whispered, "What if it's nothing? Or worse, what if it's everything?" Daniel met her gaze, his voice steady. "Then we face it together." She nodded, though her stomach twisted with dread. Each step closer to the unknown felt like stepping deeper into her past, into wounds she wasn't sure she was ready to uncover. They reached a small weathered house at the edge of town. The paint peeled and the porch sagged under years of neglect. Emma's chest tightened as the front door creaked open, revealing a woman she had never seen before. The stranger's eyes mirrored Emma's, dark and weary, filled with recognition that pierced through her. "You'll know me," the woman said, voice trembling. "But I knew him. Long before you did." Emma's stomach dropped, her breath faltering. Every word felt like the ground shifting beneath her. She whispered, "Who are you to him?" and feared the answer more than silence. The woman revealed herself as Sarah, a name Emma had never heard, but would never forget. "He wasn't who you thought," Sarah said, her voice trembling but resolute. She explained how he lived two lives, weaving lies into love, carrying secrets like poison. Emma's knees threatened to buckle, her mind rebelling against the truth unraveling before her. "No, you're wrong," she whispered, but deep inside a part of her knew. The details Sarah shared were undeniable, moments, dates, confessions that aligned too perfectly. Betrayal took on a new shape, sharper and heavier than she had ever imagined. Emma staggered back, her breath shallow as the weight of revelation crushed her chest. The man she had loved, the one who shattered her, had never been the man she believed him to be. Every moment replayed in her mind, now painted with lies. She pressed her hand against her mouth, muffling a cry, her body trembling with rage and heartbreak. Daniel reached for her arm, grounding her, but she shook her head, whispering, "I don't even know who I was loving." The truth cut deeper than the betrayal itself. The world, once fragile, now felt completely broken. Emma sat alone on the porch, her hands gripping the wooden railing as dawn painted the sky in bruised colors. The truth echoed inside her like an unrelenting drum. She whispered, "He destroyed me, and he wasn't even real." Her chest rose and fell with sharp breaths, the air tasting bitter. Daniel approached quietly, hesitant to disturb her storm. "Emma, you can't let him define what you become," he said gently. Her eyes met his, burning with both fury and despair. "Then who am I without him?" she asked. The question lingered, heavier than the morning fog, demanding an answer only she could give. Later that day, Emma confronted Sarah again, demanding every detail. Each revelation cut deeper, but it also hardened something inside her. No longer did she collapse under each word. Now she stood taller, fueled by defiance. "He may have broken me," she said, voice trembling but firm, "but he doesn't get to own my ending." Sarah looked at her with guilt, whispering, "I thought you deserved to know, even if it destroyed you." Emma inhaled sharply, steadying herself. For the first time she felt strength bloom through her rage, fragile but unshakable. She realized she could choose to rise. That evening, Emma sat at the edge of the riverbank, the current rushing like her thoughts. Daniel joined her quietly, lowering himself to sit beside her. "You're stronger than you think," he said softly. Emma shook her head, her reflection in the water distorted by ripples. "I don't feel strong. I feel shattered." Daniel reached for her hand, his grip steady. "Strength isn't about feeling whole. It's about moving forward even when you're broken." Tears slipped down her face, but she didn't look away. For the first time, she let his words sink into her soul like seeds of truth. Emma returned home that night, standing before the mirror. She studied her reflection as though seeing herself for the first time. Her swollen eyes and weary face no longer felt like weakness, but proof of survival. "You're still here," she whispered to herself, trembling but resolute. She pulled the last letter from her drawer, staring at its words one final time. Slowly, she tore it apart, piece by piece, each shred falling like the remnants of chains broken. Her body shook, but her heart surged with release. For the first time, she felt free of his grip. The storm that once consumed her had given way to stillness. Emma stepped outside, the night air cool against her skin. Daniel waited at the porch, watching her with quiet reverence. She looked up at the stars, breathing deeply as if filling her lungs with the universe itself. Her voice was soft but unshaken. "I thought I needed him to survive, but I was wrong. I only needed to find myself again." Daniel's lips curved into a faint smile, pride gleaming in his eyes. Emma closed her eyes, letting the silence settle, no longer empty but finally, mercifully whole. Morning light filtered through the curtains like gentle fingers caressing Emma's weary face. She sat at the kitchen table, the steam from her tea rising in lazy spirals. For weeks, mornings had felt like burdens, but today was different. Her breath came steady, as if her lungs had finally remembered how to fill with ease. She whispered, "I am still here," and the words vibrated softly, neither weak nor broken. Her eyes traced the patterns in the wood grain, noticing beauty in small details again. The quiet no longer pressed against her chest, it expanded like an open field. Daniel appeared in the doorway, leaning casually with a half smile. His voice carried warmth as he said, "You look like you've remembered who you are." Emma met his gaze, her lips twitching into a fragile smile that held new strength. For the first time in months, she believed that the reflection in his eyes was real. She was more than her pain. Emma walked slowly through the park, each step deliberate, as though reclaiming the ground beneath her. The same path once mocked her with memories, yet today the air felt lighter, carrying the scent of damp earth and blooming grass. She whispered, "This place doesn't own me anymore." Daniel's footsteps fell in rhythm beside hers, steady and reassuring. He glanced at her with quiet pride. "Sometimes," he said, "healing is returning to the places that broke you, and discovering you've outgrown their power." Emma inhaled deeply, letting the breeze fill her lungs like a promise. Her heart no longer recoiled at laughter in the distance. Instead, it embraced the sound as proof that life continued, and she could too. Her shoulders loosened, her back straightened. The park became not a prison but a testament to her strength. She whispered, "I survived here. Now I will live here." Emma sat alone by the riverbank at dusk, the air filled with the scent of wet earth and wild grass. The rushing water mirrored the chaos she once carried, but tonight it whispered of flow, change, and endless possibility. She dipped her fingers into the current, watching ripples expand outward like echoes of her past, dissolving into the distance. Her tears fell quietly, softer now, no longer sharp with agony but gentle as rain. "I am not who I was," she whispered. The words did not sting. They felt like truth. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply, her chest rising steady, heart steadying with it. For so long, she had feared that pain defined her, but now she realized pain was only part of the story. She smiled faintly through her tears, embracing the scars as part of her strength. Tonight, the water didn't mirror her breaking, it mirrored her becoming. Emma carried the torn remnants of his letters in her hands, her fingers no longer trembling but steady. She placed them gently into a small wooden box, not to hide them, but to give them their final place. She didn't burn them, because they no longer deserved fire. She didn't bury them, because they no longer deserved soil. She kept them, not as chains, but as proof of survival. "You don't own me anymore," she whispered, her voice steady, almost triumphant. Daniel stood behind her, silent, his eyes reflecting admiration. She touched the lid one final time before turning away, her back straight, her steps calm. The past would always remain, but it no longer held dominion. Those scraps of paper, once filled with lies, now existed only as symbols of the battles she had endured, and the battles she had won. That night, Emma lay on her bed, moonlight washing over her face in soft silver. The silence that once suffocated her now wrapped around her like a soft blanket. She whispered, "I can breathe again." Her hand rested over her heart, its rhythm calm and steady. She closed her eyes, but instead of hearing echoes of his betrayal, she heard only her own breath, strong, alive, unbroken. Daniel's words returned to her, but now they were joined by her own truth. She was enough. She always had been. For the first time, she didn't cling to survival. She embraced life. The scars within her would never disappear, but they had transformed into something new. Strength. As sleep overtook her, peace flowed through her veins like quiet fire. Tomorrow would come, and she was ready to meet it. Emma stepped into the damp morning grass, dew brushing against her bare feet like 1,000 tiny awakenings. The horizon was awash with soft pinks and golds, the world itself exhaling the night. Her breath formed a visible mist, dissolving quickly, reminding her of how fleeting pain once felt eternal. She whispered, "This is mine. This life is mine." The words didn't tremble anymore. They rooted themselves in her chest, steady and certain. She closed her eyes, the cool wind brushing her cheeks, carrying away the last fragments of who she once was. Behind her, Daniel stood still, his presence quiet but reverent, unwilling to intrude. She turned slightly, meeting his gaze with a look that spoke louder than words. She no longer needed saving. She was standing on her own. Emma stretched her arms wide, letting the morning air wrap her like an embrace. The breeze lifted her hair, the coolness filling her lungs until she felt light, untethered. She whispered, "I carry them, but they do not carry me." Every scar carved into her heart felt transformed, no longer marks of weakness, but the script of survival. Daniel called softly, "Emma?" His voice carried hesitation, as though afraid to break her moment of peace. She turned to him, her lips curling into a smile, not forced, not fragile, but whole. That smile was her answer. It told him she had risen, that she had reclaimed herself from the ashes. He looked at her, pride gleaming in his eyes, yet said nothing more. Silence was enough. Silence meant freedom. Later, she sat on the porch, her gaze turned skyward. The stars were fading, swallowed by daylight, yet she lingered in their presence, imagining them as silent witnesses to her journey. She whispered, "Every ending is also a beginning." Daniel joined her, his footsteps soft against the old wood. He didn't speak, didn't ask if she was all right. He simply sat beside her, shoulders nearly touching, offering nothing but presence. For Emma, this was enough. She didn't need promises anymore. She didn't need someone to erase the pain. She needed space to live within it, and someone who believed she could. She leaned back against the railing, her body grounded, her spirit unshaken. For the first time, she felt the power of her own survival, not as a victim, but as the author of her own rebirth. Inside, Emma's eyes drifted once more to the box of letters on the shelf. For a heartbeat, her chest tightened, remembering the nights when those words felt like shackles. But now, she smiled softly. The letters were not monsters anymore. They were proof of her endurance. She whispered, "You were never my end." Her voice was steady, filled with quiet defiance. Daniel watched from the doorway, saying nothing, respecting the ritual of closure. Emma placed her hand on the box, not with trembling, but with strength. She closed the lid with finality, then turned away. "I'm ready," she said simply. Her steps felt lighter, her back straighter. In her eyes lived the undeniable truth. The past no longer defined her. The future belonged to her alone. Emma stepped to the doorway of her home, bathed in golden light as the sun climbed higher. She paused, inhaling deeply, filling her lungs as though drawing strength directly from the earth and sky. She whispered, "I survived." This time the words were not whispers of desperation, but proclamations of triumph. The scars within her pulsed not as pain, but as proof. Daniel joined her, his presence strong but no longer a crutch. Together they looked toward the horizon, where fields stretched endlessly, shimmering under the sun. Silence fell between them, but it was not heavy. It was sacred. Emma closed her eyes, her lips curving into a true, gentle smile. The world had not broken her. It had forged her. This was no longer survival. This was reclamation. This was life.